Okay. Well, right on time. 3:30. Let's see. I'm here. Roll call. Angela's here and Todd's here. We'll go to reports and presentations. Chief Parkinson.
So you should have a monthly stat report. Nothing extremely notable on there. We still continue our trend year over year with about a 10% call increase. Much of that due to the large dip that we saw last year because of COVID. As far as incidents go in the area, none of these are actually in Bonney Lake, but did end up impacting resources. So we did have a second large-scale brush fire out in Tahale at the end of August. 3-alarm. Let's decide to come in right now. 3-alarm commercial fire in Puyallup. Most people were aware of that. Didn't impact too much. We were in communications with our counterparts in Sunland School District just to keep them informed what was going on. And then I think it was a few days later, then we had a 3-alarm multifamily fire in Edgewood where we lost 12 units. But besides that, then we had a large windstorm, which everybody was familiar with over the weekend. And outside of running a lot of 911 calls, nothing else of significance occurred during that. So knock on wood. COVID, everybody's aware of what's going on in the region for the most part. Local impacts that we're seeing, we're not having any difficulty yet with transporting people to the hospital. The issue that they are having now, Good Sam, for instance, on a daily basis, they've changed their front lobby to a tent out front, and so their front lobby has been turned into additional ER space. And, so that is becoming, that impact to the ER still remains locally as far as overcrowding and inability to get folks in. And at least for us so far, like I said, we're still doing okay with not being turned around or diverted somewhere else. Along with that, same thing that we're seeing throughout the country is a rise in cardiac arrest, so heart attacks. Whether that's being caused directly by COVID or whether that's being caused by a lack of desire to enter into the 911 system or seek medical attention. One way or the other, it's not just a minor increase; it's pretty substantial of what we would normally see. In a given week where we might have a couple. It's not uncommon to see two or three happening in a day here and there. So, and then vaccine mandate, like everybody else, obviously we had the impact because of the state mandate, but now working our way through the implications of the federal mandate and waiting for some final rules on there. But it looks like, obviously, and I assume City of Bonney Lake will fall in that same because of greater than 100 employees. Dealing with that federal mandate issue also, but the joy. Let's see. We have been working with Lake Tap voters groups still with delivering some EMS classes around the lake. I know we've done one so far, and I think we have a couple more, so that's been very well received by the community. As far as equipment, so a couple bond updates. Our last 2 fire engines are on their way from Wisconsin here now, so that is good news. That'll wrap up all of our equipment purchases from the bond. And then as far as buildings, if you saw our social media, Station 118 in Edgewood is probably not there anymore. It had a traco working its way through it this morning. So that's exciting. So that's about a 12-month build out until we occupy. And then Station 111, so the station across the street, we expect to go out to bid next week or the week after. So that's more of a 15-month build. So hopefully early 2023, that puts us in that building. Levies, some updates from August. So we ran 2 levy issues. One was the EMS levy, which passed, and then we ran our regular fire levy. That issue failed, so that's going back on the ballot in November. Strategic plan, I think I reported out on that a few months ago that we were working on one. That would go before our board this evening for adoption. So as soon as we get that passed, I'll share that with you all to go give you an example of what we're working on over the next 5 years. And then just budget process like everybody else. Our draft goes before our board in October with the final to them. And that is what I have. If there's any questions.
I just have a question on the vaccine mandates.
Yep.
How are you guys looking as far as your numbers and people that are not do it or?
So we have so we're roughly as far as uniformed personnel, roughly 60% vaccinated, so 40% ish That's about around 40 to 50 employees not vaccinated. Date, we've processed 20 requests roughly for exemption. All of those so far have received accommodations. So that's pretty much I would say that's the standard for all fire departments in the county, including City of Tacoma so far. We pretty regularly to make sure that we all have pretty similar policies and process. So our friends to the north have taken a different approach, and they're doing a hard line of no accommodations.
So your accommodations will allow for that,
yes.
unlike South King.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. Yes.
But Chief, what would those accommodations look like?
So accommodation, basically, what it looks like in the field is really no difference than what you see today. In other words, it's full personal protective equipment, so they've got a face mask, gown, and goggles. So the ability to transmit anything, either vax or non-vax, can be carriers. So in the field, it's really no difference. It's their impact around the workplace becomes a much more restrictive mask mandate than we work under today. But effectively, that's the minimum requirement, is that we adhere to L&I guidance. So there's a public mandate, mask mandate, and then in the non-public settings, they have a much stricter mandate. So. And that did extend for us. It extended to a couple or three non-uniform personnel, because the definition of working on a piece of equipment was extended to include IT personnel as well as our mechanics. So that anybody who was working on a medic unit or a fire engine, including the maintenance of, was included in that. So
you're not thinking you're going to have to get rid of anybody at this point?
I don't. The group that would fall into that category would be either they're vaccinated and never turned in their proof of vaccination, or they never sought or never received an accommodation. That may happen. So far, I don't. We'll find out in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
So it's a tough. I assume the federal applies to City of Bonney Lake.
If it holds to the 100
if
FTE.
it holds
to
yeah.
the 100 FTE, yes.
Yeah. So, it hits, so the federal hits us because the employee count. It also hits us because of Medicare, Medicaid funding. And that we expect will apply over to our non-uniformed personnel. And kind of that same split, a little bit higher rate of vaccinated, but.
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, the OSHA guidelines haven't come down from the federal.
No, they haven't. They haven't. We're working from basically the same principle, that there'll be I want to say November 12th, I think is kind of the rumor right now, but basically kind of the same guidelines. Will still process requests for religious and medical exemption. Accommodations would look basically exactly the same for those folks, and kind of go from there. So.
Are you aware of any exemptions that would? I know you said that.
For us, we have not, no, because I'm the signer on all those, and so I have not denied. We've had a couple who we've had to have additional information from them.
Sure.
Is there any connection between the Pierce County Fire discussions, or are you kind of isolated in those policy discussions?
Unfortunately, we're very isolated as far as, we obviously we connect professionally, but part of, they have some different, one of the things that they have that's very different from us is with King County EMS. That's a third payer system, so all of the EMS revenue goes to a third party. It goes to King County Public Health and King County EMS, and so that group has some say into how the King County Fire Chiefs make some decisions, because they receive their funding, where we receive it directly from the county, from the taxpayers. They get it through somebody else who got to weigh in a bit more on that. So it's most organizations seem to be following the same path that we do throughout the state. When we talk to our counterparts in Snohomish, and I was on the phone with Chief of Bellingham today. So city's a little bit different than the fire districts, just governments.
Else? Great, thanks, Chief. Next, we'll go to Public Safety Report, Chief Jeter.
Thank you. You'll see the report. Hopefully you've had a chance to review it. One thing of note, the aircraft landing two hot air balloons decided
I watched
to
that
land.
happen.
Did you?
I was having ice cream outside.
Oh,
My
got
kids-
another
that's it.
show.
It was a show. It was definitely a show.
So luckily nobody was hurt. Definitely something that we're not. Fire. I think it got everybody paid last year. Thanks to the quick work. PSC had power back. As far as the numbers show, I think I might have mentioned, for whatever reason, it really jumped. We had 10 fly, whereas before the highest one was. What's driving that, whether it was heat, what exactly happened, we'll definitely keep an eye on this. Did have a stabbing last night, but it turned out to be, at least right now, accidental. Investigating it. It can domestic violence. It was a full moon last night.
I noticed
Quite
that.
large.
So I am 33 years in the business. I am a believer. I don't know where you fall on that, but our folks were busy last night. I sent John a text. I didn't get any sleep because out of town. So other than that, our calls are up slightly, about 300 over last year. Have picked up our traffic enforcement a bit as far as just being visible out there and stopping people. Back to doing that. Councilmember Dole joined us at our swearing in recently. We just swore him in at 3 o'clock today. Officer Ryan Watson, he has 4 years of service with Tukwila, lives in the Buckley area, wanted to be a part of the community. Great pickup for us, has a lot of experience. And then Officer Miranda Harris has 9 months service with Mukilteo. Again, she lives in Buckley, grew up in the area. So both of them want to serve in that. Findings about that. Definitely what we're looking for. We want people that want to be at Bonney Lake. I think that's a testament to the council support and the community support the department has, that we are a destination department where we don't offer any incentives. Sumner, on the other hand, is offering $10,000 signing bonus.
Oh my goodness.
And they're struggling. I heard somebody was up to 50. Terry, did you?
I didn't hear 50.
Oh my
Wow.
goodness.
Somebody, I want to say it was Everett.
Wow.
Crazy. I know there's some as much as 15,000, and
Yeah.
I've heard that 50 was the highest. I haven't confirmed that. But it's a good testament to our department, and we have the officer from Tukwila has already recruited 3 others that tested and have ridden along. So we have a great list. Should we have another vacancy? We were set to have another vacancy. Try to retire on the first, but we were notified that our instructor at the academy will be coming back to us because of the vaccine mandate. Vaccinated, they are not offering exemption. Done, he's coming back. So we anticipate getting him back on the 18th unless something changes. This year will be the first year the police department will be involved in a campaign called Real Officers Wear Pink. And we have authorized the purchase of pink badges for our officers. So you'll see a few of us sporting these. We also some pins that we've allowed. Those that I'm sure probably you don't know, we have currently 2 of our spouses are fighting breast cancer. One of them is about a year removed from fighting breast cancer. We have another member who is also a survivor and a former member. We've been impacted pretty hard by this. So when they contacted us to participate, we thought it'd be a great way to honor the ladies. So we'll be doing that in the month of October. We'll have a awareness campaign on our social media. We are going to try to do a bit of fundraising, but low pressure, just kind of put it out there. There's not going to be any fundraising. We'll have a web page and people choose to pay. More about awareness and honoring our ladies. Month of October. Pretty good feedback. The officers are excited. It's something we've never done before. honored to have this in there. Probably rather not have it, I'm sure, but
Awesome. Thank you. Questions? We'll go on to business and action. Oh, it looks like just discussion items. Interlocal agreement between Bonney Lake and East Pierce for provision of fire inspection services.
Right, I'll lead off on that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Included in your packets is an interlocal agreement that was presented to the city by East Pierce. The interlocal agreement would provide for the establishment of a fire prevention and life safety inspection program. East Pierce would complete the inspections, and where the city gets involved is that we would then provide the enforcement to that. So that if at the completion of an inspection, East Pierce finds that there's violations that violate the International Fire Code or City Code, then they would make the business owner aware of that. And if I neglected to mention, this program is specifically with our commercial businesses. This isn't private residences. But if the business owner, once notified of these, does not make the corrections, then they would fall into the city code enforcement program for enforcement. And that could take on lots of different things, whether it's just fines or anything up to potentially closing down a business. I guess if they don't comply, this would be a new one for us. So I would rely a little bit on the chief's experience here and what he's seen. Right now, the chief and I have talked about it a little bit for the city side. He's, guessing from previous experience, maybe 8 to 10 hours a year for our enforcement folks, should something rise up to that level. But beyond that, it's a pretty straightforward agreement that would renew automatically on January 1st of each year. 3 months to either party, notice if we want to cancel. I'll defer to the chief to talk about the scope of the inspection program itself, but wanted to give you a heads up. If this is something that sounds like, something we want to join with East Pearson, then I would bring that back relatively quickly to committee and council to go through that process and get it approved.
What would be the cost for us? Is it just enforcer's time, essentially?
Pretty much. Okay. Yeah, I don't see where there would be any cost beyond just staff time to provide the enforcement activity.
So the alternative is not doing it.
Yeah.
That was my opposite question.
And so Chuck King's online here, so he's our fire marshal and assistant chief as well. So in the past, we have not done this because we have not had the staff time to do it. The fire marshal's office has corrected its mission now that we're going away from doing plan reviews for new construction and putting them onto this task. So kind of major impacts become firefighter safety, public safety. They're safe. Kind of the financial impacts or benefit to the city become in the long term is every 5 years we get rated by the WSRB, Washington Survey Rating Bureau. They are who insurance companies turn to determine or a portion of their rate. Currently, City of Bonney Lake is at a 4. You're rated on a scale of 1 to 9, like golf. The lower score, better. We don't have any 1s in the States. We have a couple 2s. Currently, Bonney Lake sits at a class 4, which is a good rating. All of our cities sit in that same spot. The county actually sits at a 3, so the county has a reason why is the county fire marshal does these annual life safety inspections. By bringing this in, that's really the only difference between a person who owns, their house or their business that's outside of the city limits of any of our cities, is that we can't do this, or we haven't been able to staff time where the county fire marshal can. So biggest impact for the homeowner, what we're typically told in insurance to insurance company, it changes. Going from a 4 to a 3 for a homeowner, probably not that big of a deal. It impacts more business rates as far as them seeing a drop in.
This would be commercial.
Correct. This commercial only. Yeah. So Chuck, you wanna talk to this a little bit more real quick, and he can talk through the.
Sure, Chief. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
That's always got to be the first question with these types of meetings. Yes. So as Chief explained, we're looking for something. We've actually been building the program for the last couple of years in hopes of getting to the prevention aspect. Rather than just building buildings through plan reviews and what have you, meeting municipal code and fire code, building codes, a lot of times occupants, they lose sight of what they're doing. They start blocking exits and things like that. We want to make sure that, those types of activities are not underway. We want to make sure that if there's an incident, people can exit. If there's a fire, the sprinkler systems work because they've been maintained and they're not blocked. Lots of things like that. We do want to go into this, at least at the beginning stages, we want to educate people. We're not walking in with a big hammer. We want to educate the employees and the business owners, managers of responsibilities, which most of them want to do what's right. So we just need to educate, make corrections, which will be, noted for future use if necessary. But the goal is to get things corrected as quick as possible. So we don't expect too many people to say, that we're going to have problems elevated to enforcement. It should be pretty clean and simple because people do want to do what's right. So, but we want to do annual inspections of all the businesses. And yeah, we'll report it up to whoever you folks want us to do. But in-house, we'll work it and work with the occupants to make the corrections as fast as possible. So, but we will document and we'll provide the information to your, building official if you want it, or just problems to your enforcement if that's what you want also. So either way.
In this, I just said annually, is it something that they would schedule with you, or is it kind of, random, or how does that work?
Well, that's interesting question because I actually asked other departments how they manage this program, and most of the time it's knock on the door. If an occupant, a business occupant says, gee, now's not a good time, then it gets rescheduled, reattempted a week later, something like that. We are working on a flyer that we hope to mail out to the folks, all the business owners, which we have a list of provided by the 4 cities. We'll send them a notice saying that, hey, we're doing this, it's coming. Here's some tips, trying to clean things up before we get there. Again, prevention is the key, sooner than later. And if necessary, then yes, we can reschedule. But most likely it'll be a knock on the door and say, hey, we're here for your inspection. Because once we send out the flyer, they've been warned that we're coming. And again, the focus is going to be on education.
Where are you at with the other 3 cities?
So Sumner agreement's been executed. Edgewood, it's been executed by Edgewood and will be approved by my board tonight. You guys are the last one. We had an existing agreement. So, yeah.
How do you handle federal facilities? And I only asked this from a previous jurisdiction I worked in where the postmaster would not let the fire marshal come in.
Good question. Chuck, do you know the answer to that?
No. Interesting. My 20 years in the inspection department came from the Boeing company, and we didn't have to worry about that inside our fence lines. But definitely a good question. I don't expect the post office to have an issue. But yeah, I would imagine there's places over on Pacific Highway that are actual tribal, and they might not let us in also. But that is all right.
Sorry, Chuck.
That's okay.
What in that instance is they were a tenant in a building, and we would write the landlord and just say, FYI, your tenant, failed to let in the fire marshal and put me on notice type of thing.
I was thinking back from previous experience. I know post office in North Bend we could walk into with a crew and do it. However, in city of Issaquah, we had to defer it to our fire marshal's office, and that they would coordinate getting in. But
I would have to think most businesses would be.
Agree, John. Agree.
And I think
it's similar to the. Sorry, John. Similar to the whole illegal fires activities that we've been seeing a lot of in the last couple of weeks. Truly the homeowner can ask us to get off their property, and we have to do that. Without a search warrant, we can't be on their property.
Yeah, so I think with what I was just going to say is with the occupants of these businesses, the big box stores, they're used to doing this. They're probably scratching their head wondering where we've been. It's the mom and pop stores that usually get caught a little bit more off guard, and oftentimes can be fall into having more violations because they've extension cords in place and permanent. And again, like Chuck said, that just becomes the education. And so long as we're seeing progress, we just keep contact and the problem corrected. So.
We're not doing these inspections.
Correct.
This would be starting the program. This program does exist. Basically.
Yes.
It's funny because I just that it's not happening now is kind of shocking.
Yeah.
That would be part of like the renewal license for your business. But if they're leasing the space, is it default to the landlord?
Yes.
Do you have any issues with it?
I think as long as there's notice sent to the business that they're aware that this, that they're not caught off guard. And
I think a lot of times they're really harping on the fact that they're going to work with the education aspect of it, which I think is the way to go, especially starting off, getting people to get with the program, but not have the hammer pulled on yet.
This would apply to like restaurants and clothing stores, small.
Yep.
And this has been vetted through legal as well.
And that way you also be also inspecting, like I know there was a lot of issues this last year and heaters and tents and that whole thing, and does that kind of fall in this as well?
Chuck, on that, so that question, so on outdoor dining, who's that falling to now with change in enforcement for fire marshal's office? Are we still doing that kind of inspection?
No, that type of inspection would fall back to the city. At least when the conversations that we had with Sumner, my conversations with Todd Plum, hired by Sumner, supporting Bonney Lake, that would fall onto the fire code official based on the municipal code of the city.
Brian, you said, I think you mentioned 10 hours maybe of staff time or something. Is that per, what, month? What
when
are we
the chief
talking
and I talked, it was just kind of a guesstimate at a per year commitment.
It's very rare that a person won't come into if you give them the time and if you work with them. That's just from personal experience. There's always those one-offs, but you're probably talking about a business at that point. You're not talking about, again, the Costco's of the world. They're probably already in compliance, or if they're not, they're going to fix it. The locally owned store is the one that may need. But generally, you probably already know it already if you've got somebody who falls into that group. Beyond that, they're usually very low level. They haven't maintained their extinguisher, exit sign lighting's out. They've locked their back door that's required to be unlocked during hours. Pretty simple violations that generally be corrected the day of or within.
Any questions? I think we're good to move forward with
Bring us
that.
back to public safety next.
Do you want it to come back to committee, or are you okay with it?
I think it's
packaged up and
I think
No, I
it'd
think
be okay to
it's fine.
go.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's okay
I
to
think
go
it's
straight through. I mean, all these things are super important. The hallways, for emergency exits, I know have a tendency to just get cluttered up just when people get busy during holiday. Or I can see Marshall's stockroom or emergency exit needing a touch base, or as a reminder. I think it's a no-brainer. I think it's
So throw it on consent.
consent agenda, next available consent agenda.
I think so.
Whenever Ryan can get it ready.
Right.
I can have it. Sounds good.
Good, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next discussion item is the draft senior center sheltering policy. Wait, this is probably your last big deal, right?
Right. The last public safety committee.
Yeah.
So you've had an opportunity to look at it. The concept behind the policy was to, frankly, to identify that we will generally open a cooling or warming station if it's needed that meets the criteria that are identified, and give some high-level direction regarding how it gets staffed, who decides that it's going to be open. The remaining details of how a shelter will work, all of that, that would go into a sheltering plan. So that's not part of the policy itself. We have, in further review, we did make one further change to the policy that is not part of your packet. And it simply identifies a little bit better how we're going to staff these warming centers or cooling centers, disaster shelters, particularly on weekends or holidays. And it says that we'll generally try and use volunteers and Red Cross staff or management employees, and as a result will be work on our representative, so that we don't get caught in overtime if we don't have to. So anyway, that's the policy. I'm happy to respond to questions. If you have suggestions, happy to take those too, and sure that they get considered in any further work on the policy itself.
The only thing I have, and I don't know if there's a solution. Really appreciate you putting this together, Woody. It was nicely done. And this is more about just having it at the senior center, especially mostly during COVID times. So that was the only thought I've been having is like, yeah, we're trying to, those are some of the most vulnerable people we have in the city. And, now we're going to throw people over in that direction. So that would be my only concern. Is there another spot where we could shelter them and all of that? I think the idea is great. I think we need to have something in place, but that would be the only concern with COVID is sending more people to that particular location.
I think to that, the senior center is the only city-owned facility that has, a kitchen.
Right, exactly. Right.
We have a microwave here.
And a generator, doesn't
Right.
it?
Yeah, it has a generator. Yes, there's no generator in this.
I mean,
Right.
I understand your point, Todd. I think it's at greater risk. I think it's up to their personal
Sure.
choice where they want to go. You have, whether it's over probably more dangerous
Right, sure.
and overheat, exhaustion, and I think we're operating as safe as we can. Nothing is perfect, but we're operating cooling center well for them. Sure.
Right.
And to that point, Woody, correct me if I'm wrong, but this last heat wave we had, we did put the notice out there that was open up, and if I remember correctly, Lori said they had a couple inquiries, but nobody actually came.
Correct.
Yeah, it was like 12 to 5. Though.
Yeah,
And it was kind of short notice. Like we didn't really.
Yes, it was,
Yeah,
right.
So we weren't planning on it. Like knowing, like, okay, going into this weekend or going into Thursday, Friday, on Monday, it's going to be 102. Heads up, this is available for you. And I just think it says something as to take. It's
sure,
not a mandate.
absolutely.
It's not something they
Sure.
have to do or participate in, but we're making it.
We're anticipating that a lot of the people that may take advantage of this are seniors,
Right.
and they're already
Sure.
kind of familiar with
Yeah, sure.
the
No,
building,
absolutely.
so they feel comfortable
Right,
coming.
absolutely.
So I think for all of those reasons,
Yeah.
the senior center seems, and it has a program that we can kind of shut down
Sure.
pretty
Yeah,
quickly.
Right.
So for all of those reasons, it seemed like the most logical building that we had control of as a city.
And then so it is possible that we could have it staffed through volunteers. Legally
Yeah,
and all that.
they
we're
would, yeah,
okay to
I mean,
do so.
they would have to have training.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I think I'd have.
are you saying you thought we would have to?
I just thought that was I thought that was already protocol to have a staff member or city employee on site, at least one.
Oh, the building monitor?
The building monitor, yeah,
Yeah.
versus all. So it couldn't be run entirely by volunteers.
Not necessarily 24/7. You know, if we
Coming and
open up,
going.
if we open up a shelter, we have staff there, and they feel like the volunteers are able to appropriately run shelter program overnight, for example, then we wouldn't feel compelled to necessarily have to. Yeah, just to establish and make sure it's running properly and that it's being staffed, or that the volunteers are showing up, that the Red Cross, if they're going to running the shelter, that they have their people showing up. But once that's all set up and going appropriately, then I don't think that we need. Still running properly.
Right, yes.
So this would be one of our many administrative policies. We have an administrative policy book. No council action is needed, but since it came up through the committee, wanted to bring it back and give you an direction we were headed in.
Awesome.
Just information.
Yeah, I think it's great. I'm excited to have something that is like, it's not just arbitrarily thrown out there. Okay, we're going to open, we're going to close, whatever. There's actually some kind of protocol to look through and go, okay, this is when we should open. So I think that's great. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Hopefully someday we'll have
Someday.
a
That'd
nice
be
one.
good. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Next discussion item, second internet backup connection.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is a long time coming. Give a little background to start with. When city or business or whoever runs their own fiber along power lines, PSE poles, we have to put in a plan to PSE, and PSE takes a look at all those poles, and whoever does anything to that pole has to make that pole ready, or any maintenance to that pole, in order for us to be allowed to run our fiber along that pole. So running fiber can be fairly inexpensive, or if you have to replace a pole, which the city did a long time ago when we ran our own fiber, $5,000 a pole. That was probably 10 years ago, so it's only probably more expensive now. With that said, if you see fiber along a pole, that's multiple carriers running along the exact same run of poles, because if someone's already made those poles ready to take the fiber run, you're most likely won't have to do anything because someone already did it ahead of you. So you get kind of an aggregate of carriers running along the same pathway through towns and cities, because if someone's gone that route, they've fixed any issues, and usually you can just kind of follow that same path. So it's less expensive to follow what someone else did. Problem with that is, if one of those poles get taken out, it's not just one provider, it's multiple providers. When we had the Sumner Grade fire last year, and I think there was 8 poles along Myers Road were damaged, we unfortunately found out that literally every single broadband carrier ran their fiber along Myers Road because it was the most economical way to get into the city. So you had Comcast, CenturyLink, all the fiber backbones for T-Mobile and Verizon and AT&T, they were all burnt up. So not only did we have a loss of PSE power, we had a complete loss of cable TV, your high-speed internet, and most of the cellular towers can do backup tower to tower, but it's extremely slow. So during that fire, you may have great cellular coverage, but your speed is just a trickle because it's having to backhaul bounce between tower to tower to tower. The city has our internet through Comcast fiber optic, and we do have a small cellular modem for our SCADA backup. So if something goes on in the Comcast internet, they'll do maintenance every great once in a while in the middle of the night, and our Comcast internet will go down. That little Verizon modem will keep our communication to our water and sewer sites up and running, so our SCADA doesn't go down during that time frame. The issue was, of course, during this fire, that Verizon modem is competing with everybody else's Verizon cell phone, and it was barely able to hang on to just keeping SCADA up and running. I know it was incredibly difficult at the EOC because number one, it's not the best cellular connective area to begin with, and then to have so many people with laptops all trying to go off a Verizon modem that I have in that instance, but it was really, really difficult. And we really needed a secondary, some other kind of connection that isn't going to just jump on the same route that everybody else is, that have that single point of failure that all providers do right now. So I've looked at microwave as well as satellite. And satellite is available. It's a fair bit more expensive than this option. This option, there's a local company that can do microwave, has to be line of sight. So it's basically, and they have a bunch of different repeaters, but this would be going from their main Tacoma office, a line of sight to our Ponderosa tank, because unfortunately the tower at Public Safety Building does not have line of sight. We tried that first. But it will go to Ponderosa first, and then another microwave from Ponderosa tank to our Public Safety Building. And what we can do is we can start at basically our monthly base cost is $250 a month, and that's for 10 megabits. Very small. That's their smallest plan for microwave. But what we can do is, in the event of our Comcast going out, we can give them a call and say, hey, crank us up to 100 meg, and without, other than them, in about an hour, we can be back up to 100 megabits per second, which is what our Comcast fiber provides right now. So we can pay, in a sense, I hate to say $250 at bare minimum, but the bare minimum, but when we actually need it, we can crank it up and still be successful in being able to provide internet access to EOC, to our police, and to the rest of the buildings in the extended, I think we were out of our internet for 4 or 5 days during the fire. But we would be able to continue our operation successfully with that in place. It is a $6,500 installation cost, and that's primarily because that's equipment for 2 microwave pops from their place to Ponderosa and then Ponderosa to our Public Safety Building. This is not funded in the budget. It is something that I've been working on, which is why I'm just bringing it as a discussion item to gauge the interest in council to see whether this is something we want to try and add in as a budget amendment, or do we say this is great, but let's wait till the next budget cycle. I really need to gauge your interest in this particular item because, like I said, it's not part of the budget.
My thought would be a budget amendment. I'm all for it. I think the Sumner Grade Fire really showed us, right, how bad that was and how needed this would be to have some kind of a backup. I think that's so important to be able to have an EOC that actually is operational and whatnot, right? So super important. What do you guys think?
I agree.
100%.
Yeah, for sure.
I think we've all been pretty on board with getting our emergency management up to speed and making sure that, unlike we learned that we were not prepared. And so I think this is just one piece of that puzzle of making sure. And we can use it as have a low grade contract that we can activate to a higher level when needed. That's the best solution possible, right? So perfect tool you found. I don't know what microwave means exactly, so maybe you want to explain to me what that term biology means.
Basically, it is you have 2 antennas, covered by distance, and instead of a normal cellular, like the Wi-Fi cellular we have right now, it just kind of goes all over the place. Where these are very pinpointed, they're literally aligned directly. So it's basically sending a microwave. Think of microwaves. Yeah. In a very fixed beam directly to that other antenna. So you can have but you can have really extremely high rates of transmitting because you're literally transmitting just a tiny little line, almost like if you think like a laser beam. Yeah. But it's microwave from one site to the other. And it doesn't spread across. So a lot of this, you don't have to worry about getting into frequency licensing because you are such a narrow beam. You're not going to interrupt anyone else's signal. But it does have to be true, pure line of sight You can't have a tree in the way. It's very strict on where those two line up, which is why, unfortunately, we couldn't find any of their locations that would hit the top of the public safety tower. Ponderosa is great because it's literally the high point in the city, and you could pick out their different antennas and say, we have line of sight here, we have line of sight here, we have line of sight here. So it's a great location. The downside is it's a double bounce. But then on the positive side, there's a generator there because it's our water tank. It's one of our main storage facilities. So if power does go out in other places, that has a generator to keep everything running. So that double hop is not as bad as like a point of failure because it does have backup generator power. And it is, like I said, it's a great location in the city because it is literally a high point, and then you're 100 feet up on top of a tank.
Chuck, you mentioned it goes to the public safety building.
From the public safety building, it connects on the outside of our firewall. So it's another interface into our main firewall. And then it's just kind of sitting there. We're not actively using it until our main connection goes down, in which case it's just automatically flipped over.
I guess my question is, how does it get from the public safety building to here?
Our normal fiber runs.
It activated the public.
Yes. Yeah.
We needed it to.
Oh, it will come once it comes into our internal network. Then it's every building. It's the senior center.
Okay,
it's old public works center. It's this building, and it's the new public works facility.
Some of those above ground.
The fiber.
connection? Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So
The
worst
potential.
case, we could have a squirrel incident again.
Yes.
To take us down.
Yes.
And is their office in Tacoma, Burns?
In the same instance, yes, we would.
But theoretically, and it could be reoriented. You said that they have, 5 facilities?
Yes, it could be. That's not a, that wouldn't be part of this type of a contract. That would have to be a much, greater in-depth contract to say, to do an SLA to say, if your building burnt down, then within X amount of time, we would want you to be able to reposition our antenna to take advantage of a different location.
I think it's a great start.
Mhm.
I think it's excellent, definitely for the amendment. And wise.
What we will do is we can check with Sherry, given a low amount, if it's something we can just absorb in the budget now, or if we need to wait for the amendment. We'll circle back with Sherry.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Great job.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. Next thing, approval of meeting minutes. Anything? Any issues? No. Approved. Open committee discussion. South Sound 901 meeting recap. Member Dole.
So thank you. On August 25th, attended the South Sound 911 board meeting. Councilman McClymans usually joins on. I know Chief was on. They went over the committee reports, which was great. After that, most of the discussion was around the Public Safety Communication Center and the progress there, which was good to get filled in there. No major announcement came out of the meeting. There was 2 kind of matters of business. There was motion 2021 or 2021-29, which was a amendment to their budget for the Hill International contract for the PSCC due to just some extra cost. There was some discussion about getting reimbursed for that, but it was approved, and that was the change there. And then there was an assessment. Sumner did an assessment and realized that they weren't being, the police department, their chief recognized that they were being charged for a service that they weren't utilizing. And so there was a change to that. That was resolution 2021-02. But other than that, there was an approval of their minutes, and that was it.
Great. Thank you. All right, and then boat launch signing discussion. So I know we talked for just a little bit about the putting in a different type of sign that's maybe just got the main issues with the lake, maybe speed limit, direction of travel, wear a life jacket, that kind of thing. And I think did you have that picture of that sign that the guy had given us, the other lake. I have it somewhere, maybe. I don't have it on me right
I
now.
don't have it on my phone.
Yeah, unfortunately. Hey, what he'd shown us was a large sign, a picture of the lake, essentially, arrows, like direction. This is the direction you're supposed to travel. Here's some basic rules. We're a PFD, have a, what, you know,
Lights at night.
but not doing the, like, I think currently we have, like, here's the RCW and here's the,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
here's
I
county
was
code,
down there
right?
today, and I know there's
It's
some.
yeah, nobody's gonna read
Right.
because
We're
it's like,
talking
good
like top
grief.
10 bullet points of things that people
Yeah,
and in colorful,
yeah, I would,
large print.
yeah, and I'd probably even like, I don't know if you do 5 to 7 or whatever. You
Yeah.
can try to figure out what, you know, what somebody might actually read to see, just for an educational aspect on the lake down there. I think that would help satisfy when people were here before talking about the boating issues that they were having as well. Feeling that we're
Yeah, we can certainly work with our sign supplier. Getting the sign together is not a problem, and they're relatively inexpensive if we're just doing one sign, depending upon the size. The only thing that I'd be curious about is just making sure that we have the message as you want it on there,
Right.
covering, you know, the
I gotta
specific
find that.
topics. If you have that picture, it'd be handy to see
Yeah,
that.
I'll get it to you.
Oh yeah, we'll find it.
And then maybe
Yeah.
maybe I don't know, work with the maritime division there, the boat cops, and get their input on maybe messaging.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Perfect.
we can do that. Yeah, if you can send me the picture, we'll get rolling on it.
I'll get it for you somehow. One of us will
Okay.
get it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, because it would just be the one by the boat launch. That's the one that's
Yep.
first, right? The other
Yep.
one is.
Yep.
So, and I think it would be plexiglass as well. rather than just have a printed seal it sign that doesn't need any glass in front of it. Oh,
Yeah.
don't say that to Chief. Hey, at Public Works.
Yeah. The only last thing, I don't have it on here, but I just want to say thank you to Woody. His last public safety meeting here. We really appreciate everything you've done and our your leadership on the EOC type aspect of things, emergency management and whatnot. Hope that we can continue that legacy a little bit
Thank
for
you. I
you.
hope so too.
We can get it done.
Eventually, yeah.
We'll get it done. Where are you off to now? I guess that's the question. Are you selling your house?
My house has already been sold.
Oh.
I sold it last year. I own another house in Utah that's south of Logan. State.
Well, with that, we're adjourned.
All right.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.